Hey, it's Megan. A week ago, I threw the perfect birthday party for my son Leo. I spent days planning, everything was set, but nobody showed up, not even my family. I was left there alone, feeling invisible. And the worst part? My sister exposed everything, a chat full of their lies, their jokes, and their cruelty. They never cared, so why did I keep fighting for them? Now, I'm done. Hook 2. My family made me feel worthless, like I was invisible. I threw a party for my son, but no one came. A week later, my sister exposed a conversation that shattered everything. The lies, the neglect. They thought they could break me, but it was them who underestimated me. What happens next will change everything. What will I do when everything I thought I knew falls apart? Combined. Hook. Hey, it's Megan. I threw a party for my son, Leo, but nobody came. I was left standing there, alone, in front of an empty yard, with my family's betrayal sinking in. A week later, my sister exposed their chat. Lies, insults, everything I've been ignoring. I was invisible to them. But now, I'm done playing their game. This is where everything changes. What will happen when the truth comes out? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. I had been preparing for Leo's 10th birthday for weeks. It was going to be a small, simple gathering, nothing extravagant. A few balloons here, a couple of party hats there, and, of course, his favorite chocolate cake. I'd always been the one to take charge of these things, mostly because nobody else ever did. My hands moved automatically as I arranged the plastic tablecloth and hung streamers from the fence in the backyard. The cake sat on the table, a little too perfect, its frosting smooth and flawless. I paused for a moment, staring at the cake, letting out a small sigh. Maybe this time, it would be different. I hoped that this year my family would show up. They had been distant lately, and I couldn't help but feel a deep need for their acknowledgement, for their recognition of the effort I poured into this. My mother, Rosalind, always had her own agenda. My brother Nate was always wrapped up in his own world. And then there was Camille, my sister, who, despite her promises, rarely kept them. But today was Leo's day. I wanted them here. I wanted them to see that I was trying, that I had been trying for so long to keep things together. I tried not to think about the last few family gatherings, the awkward silences, the empty chairs at the table, the weight of unspoken words. I didn't need to be the one to make everything happen, but it seemed like no one else cared to pick up the slack. I checked my phone again, then set it down, willing myself to be patient. I was going to make this the best birthday party Leo had ever had. This was going to be our day. A few more balloons floated across the yard, and I adjusted them slightly to catch the breeze. The clock was ticking, and the party time was nearing. I told myself it would be okay if no one arrived right away. Maybe they'd be running late. Maybe. I told Leo to play with his new toy for a bit while I set up the final touches. And he was so excited, and I didn't want to ruin that for him. But deep down, I was already bracing myself for what felt inevitable. The hours passed slowly. The sun began to sink lower, casting long shadows across the yard, and still, no one had arrived. Leo ran around with the few kids who had shown up, his friends from school. The pizza had been delivered, and the plates were full of food, but the emptiness in the yard felt heavier than it should. I kept glancing at my phone, but there were no messages. No one. Not from Camille, not from Nate, not from Mom. The group chat remained silent, as if they had forgotten the event altogether. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on my jeans as I looked out over the yard. The balloons swayed gently, almost mocking me in the silence. The chairs around the table, once set up so meticulously, now looked like a sad reminder of everything I had hoped for but didn't receive. There was an undeniable emptiness in the air, one that had settled into my chest like a stone. The weight of it hit me all at once, and it was as if I was seeing everything for the first time. My sister had promised she would be here. Mom had said she would bring a present. But now, as I stood there, watching the last of Leo's friends leave with their parents, I felt the cold sting of truth. My family had chosen not to show up. I took a deep breath, trying to push the tears away. I didn't want Leo to see how badly this hurt. I didn't want him to know that despite all the work I had done for this party, no one cared enough to be here. I heard a voice, small and unsure, tugging at my thoughts. Mom, where's Grandma? Why didn't she come? I kneeled down, trying to smile through the ache in my throat. She's just busy, honey, I said, pulling him into a hug. But we still had a great time, didn't we? Leo nodded, but I could tell his heart wasn't in it. How could it be? How could any of this be enough when the people who should have been here were nowhere to be found? As the last car drove away, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting the yard in the dim light of evening. I felt frozen. My eyes traced the empty chairs once more, each one a silent witness to what had just happened. I didn't know what hurt more, the party that had never really been, or the crushing realization that my family's absence was not just a one-time thing. It was a pattern. I stood there, holding Leo's hand, surrounded by emptiness. The yard felt too big, too quiet. I could almost hear the echo of my own voice asking, why did I even bother? As the last child ran off with their parents, the sun setting behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been forgotten. Left standing in a yard full of empty chairs, I walked into my mother's house with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. I'd been planning to confront her about what happened with Leo's birthday party, hoping for some kind of explanation. I couldn't ignore the mounting frustration any longer. I had given so much to my family, and they had barely given me a glance in return. The house smelled like the pot roast she always made when she was trying to distract herself from something. It was an odd sense of comfort, but today it only made me feel more isolated. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Mom opened it, her eyes a little too bright, as if she'd been waiting for me. Megan, she said, with a quick kiss on the cheek. What's going on? I pushed past the usual pleasantries and dove straight into it. Why didn't you come to Leo's party? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though the sting of it made my throat tighten. She sighed, rolling her eyes as if this was all some big misunderstanding. Oh, Meg, it was just a kid's party. Don't make such a big deal out of it. You know I'm always busy. Her voice was light, almost dismissive. But you promised, I pressed, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. You promised you'd be there for him. She waved a hand as though to brush away the matter. It's just one party, honey. You always make such a fuss about these things. You're being dramatic. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Dramatic? Was I really being dramatic? All I wanted was for my family to show up for me, for once, to see all the work I put in, to show Leo that they cared about him. I had spent the day trying to create something beautiful, but all I got in return was empty chairs and silence. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my cool. This isn't just about the party, Mom. It's about how you and the others never show up when I need you. I've always been the one who holds everything together. I've always been the one to make sure everyone is okay, but where are you when it matters? Her face faltered for a moment, but she quickly covered it up. I'm here now, aren't I? It's just one day, Megan. You make too much of everything. I shook my head, the frustration bubbling over. You always say that. You always downplay how I feel. I'm not asking for much, but I'm tired of pretending like it's nothing. I need you to see me, really see me. She crossed her arms, leaning back against the kitchen counter. You're making something out of nothing. Your brother's busy, and Camille, she has her own life. We're all just trying to get by. I felt the gaslight creep in. Was I really overreacting? Was I being unreasonable? No, I knew I wasn't, but she had a way of making me second-guess myself. The more she spoke, the more I felt like I was the one at fault for wanting something, anything, from them. My head was spinning. I stood there, silence hanging between us, and I realized something crucial. For the first time, I wasn't the one in the wrong. It wasn't me who had failed. It wasn't me who had been neglecting my family. It was them. All this time, I had been the one holding the pieces together, but they were the ones breaking it apart. As I stood there, listening to my mother's excuses, I felt a sickening realization deep within me. I had been manipulated. All my efforts, all my sacrifices, they had been used against me. And for what? To keep me in a place where they could control the narrative, where I was always the one left behind, always the one who gave more than I ever received. I turned on my heel and left without another word. I didn't need her excuses. I didn't need her guilt-ridden dismissals anymore. I needed to face the truth, and I knew that truth would shatter the family I had tried so hard to hold together. I sat in my car, staring at the house, trying to summon the courage to walk inside. It had been days since I had decided to confront my mother and brother. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew it had to happen. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. No more hiding, no more pretending like everything was fine. It was time to take control of my own life. I could feel the weight of the documents in my bag, the will, the inheritance papers, the proof of everything I had suspected but never confirmed. I wasn't walking into that house as the little sister who was always overlooked. I wasn't the daughter who lived to please. I was going in there to demand what was rightfully mine. I took a deep breath, grabbed the papers, and made my way to the door. When Rosalind opened it, her usual smile faltered when she saw the look on my face. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady but firm. "What is it now, Meg?" she replied, as if this was just another one of my dramatics. "I'm done," I told her, stepping inside without waiting for her invitation. "Done letting you dismiss me. Done being the one who holds everything together while you all pretend like nothing's wrong." She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "What are you talking about?" I didn't waste another second. I laid out the documents, slamming them down on the table between us. "These," I said, my finger pointing to the papers, "are your lies. The hidden will. The inheritance that was supposed to be mine. Why didn't you tell me?" Rosalind's face went pale. She straightened up, clearly trying to regain some composure. "Megan, you don't understand. That wasn't for you. Your father made those decisions. It's just how things turned out." Just how things turned out? My voice rose, and I could feel my frustration building. "You let me work my whole life for your approval, and this is how it ends. You let Nate take everything, and you left me with nothing." She tried to shrug it off. "Nate's always been better with money. You know that." It wasn't personal. "Then why didn't you ever tell me?" I demanded. "Why let me sacrifice for a family that never gave me anything in return? You were supposed to be my mother. You were supposed to protect me." "I am protecting you, Megan," she said, her tone defensive. "This is just how things have always been. You can't expect everything to go your way all the time." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "No, I can't keep doing this. You've gaslighted me my entire life. And I'm done." Nate had been sitting in the corner, watching the exchange with a detached expression. I turned to him. "And you," I said, my voice low with contempt, "don't even care, do you?" He looked up, rolling his eyes. "Meg, you're making this way too complicated. It's just money. It's not that big of a deal." His indifference hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years, I had been doing everything for them. And this was the thanks I got. A few words, a shrug, as if my entire existence wasn't worth anything. "No," I said, my voice finally steady, despite the fury swirling inside me. "It's not just money. It's my life. It's everything I've done for you. I've given everything, and I'm not going to keep begging for a little recognition anymore." I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. It wasn't about the money. It was about the years I had spent seeking their approval, the years I had sacrificed my own needs for them. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I was done. "I'm not asking for your validation anymore," I said, turning to leave. "I'm taking what's mine. I'm not your emotional caretaker. I never was." I left the house without looking back. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for them to apologize. I wasn't waiting for them to admit they'd been wrong. I was done, and I felt the weight of it lift off my shoulders. The days leading up to this moment felt endless, each one stretching longer than the last. But today was different. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as I sat alone, preparing myself. It was the calm before the storm. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and let the silence wash over me. I'd spent so many years chasing after validation, hoping for acknowledgement, and always feeling like I was left behind. But no more. This was the moment. This was my time to take back control of my life. The documents I had gathered lay in front of me. My father's will. The one I'd discovered, the one that had been hidden from me for so long. I couldn't look at it anymore. It wasn't about the inheritance, not anymore. It was about respect. It was about me finally seeing my own worth. And I wasn't going to be afraid anymore. I had made up my mind. I was no longer just a caretaker for a family that didn't appreciate me. This was about me, Megan, standing up for myself. No one else was going to do it for me. I stood up, wiped my hands on my pants, and walked to the door. It was time to face them. Rosalind and Nate. I didn't know how this would go, but I wasn't going to back down. The house felt different as I stepped inside. It was the same as always, but to me, it had changed. I wasn't walking in as the daughter who always did her best. I was walking in as someone who finally understood what she was worth. Rosalind was sitting on the couch, looking as if she hadn't a care in the world. Nate was leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. Neither of them looked at me when I entered. They hadn't even noticed I was there until I spoke. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. Rosalind didn't look up. "What now, Megan?" she asked, her tone dismissive. "I'm tired of this drama." "Yeah," I shot back. "Well, I'm tired of being your doormat." I didn't wait for her response. I reached into my bag, pulled out the documents, and slapped them on the table. "This is what you've been hiding from me. You took everything from me. The inheritance, the respect, the love, and I'm done with it." The look on their faces was priceless. Both of them were stunned. "What are you talking about?" Rosalind asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Those documents are a mistake. You don't know what you're talking about." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Don't gaslight me. I've seen this before. The lies, the excuses. I'm done. I've been done for a long time." Nate stayed silent, looking at the floor as if it could suddenly swallow him up. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. "You've always treated me like I didn't matter," I continued, my voice rising. "Like my efforts meant nothing. And for what? So Nate could take everything? So you could just dismiss me every time I tried to help?" Rosalind's face twisted in annoyance, but I didn't care. "Megan, stop being dramatic. It's just how things have always been. Nate was always the one to handle the money. You know that." "I don't care," I shouted. "I gave everything, and you never even noticed. I worked for this family, and you just threw me aside." Rosalind was silent, her lips pressed tight. It was the first time I had seen her at a loss for words. I wasn't asking for her approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to apologize. I was standing my ground, finally seeing my worth. "I'm done with this," I said, the words feeling like a weight lifting off my chest. "I'm not your emotional punching bag anymore. I won't be anyone's doormat." Nate finally looked up, but there was no apology, no acknowledgement in his eyes. He just shrugged. "It's not that big of a deal, Meg. You're blowing this out of proportion." "That's the problem," I snapped. "You never get it. You never will. But I don't need your approval anymore." "I'm not going to keep begging for a seat at the table. I'm walking away." I turned to leave, but before I did, I looked back at them. "I'm taking control of my life. I don't need you, and I won't let you drag me down anymore." As I walked out of that room, the weight of the years of manipulation and silence lifted from my shoulders. I had finally said the words I needed to say. I was no longer chained to the family that had held me hostage for so long. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my stomach. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, not sure whether to jump or retreat. After all that had happened, after all I had exposed, I was finally free. But at what cost? The confrontation with Rosalind and Nate had felt necessary, but now that it was over, the weight of my actions was sinking in. The documents, the accusations, the emotional outburst, it all seemed so final. Part of me kept asking, was it worth it? Could I have handled it better? Was there any way to have kept my family intact without exposing the truth? I felt a wave of guilt rush over me, like I had done something unforgivable. I thought about my mother's face, defensive and dismissive. She had always been like that, hasn't she? Even when I was a child, she'd never really seen me, never recognized what I sacrificed for the family. All these years, I had fought for them, for her, and yet I had never received the same in return. Sitting alone, I began to doubt myself. Should I have backed down? Could I have found another way to make them see me? The questions kept circling my mind. gnawing at the edges of my resolve. But then, as I thought about everything I'd been through, something inside me clicked. I couldn't go back. Not now. I couldn't undo what I had done, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The truth had been laid out, but now I was left alone with the mess. I could never go back, but did I have the strength to move forward? The isolation hit harder than I expected. After the confrontation, I hadn't heard from anyone. No messages, no calls, not even a small sign of reconciliation. It was as if they'd all simply disappeared from my life. Their silence was deafening. It was strange, this feeling of being completely alone when I had always been surrounded by people. I tried reaching out to friends, but the conversations felt shallow, empty. I wasn't even sure if they truly understood what I was going through. Maybe they thought I was just overreacting, or that I should let it all go. But they didn't know, did they? They didn't know what it felt like to constantly be dismissed, to always be the one putting in all the effort and receiving nothing in return. I sent a text to Lily, a friend I had known for years. "Hey, I need to talk." She replied, "Sure, what's up?" But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a wall between us. I couldn't let her into the depths of what I was feeling, what I had just done. The weight of it all was too much, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't explain it in a way that made sense. It was like talking to a stranger. But then, just as the conversation started to drift, I remembered something I had forgotten in all the noise and pain. My worth didn't depend on their approval. It never had. I wasn't weak for walking away. I wasn't wrong for standing up for myself. I was strong, and I had a right to protect my peace. The isolation was suffocating, but something inside of me told me it was the beginning of something new. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. The days that followed were filled with quiet contemplation. I knew I had made the right decision, but the road ahead felt uncertain. It wasn't just about cutting ties with my family. It was about finding my own path. One where I was no longer defined by their neglect, their expectations. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking toward myself. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the blank space in front of me. The future. It was wide open now, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I took a deep breath and started writing down plans. Career ideas, new hobbies I wanted to explore, ways to grow. For the first time in ages, I wasn't planning around my family's needs or expectations. I was planning for me. I realized then that I wasn't just breaking away from the family dynamic. I was breaking free from everything that had held me back. The idea of seeking approval, of constantly trying to please others, had been draining. I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. I was becoming the person I was always meant to be. Someone who could stand on her own, who could thrive on her own, and who didn't need anyone's permission to live her truth. But as I sat there, feeling empowered, I also knew there were still shadows from the past that I would have to face. There was still a long way to go, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, staring at the door in front of me. The moment had arrived, and yet part of me wished I could turn back, let the silence remain, pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. I'd already come too far. It was time to face them. The confrontation that had been building in my mind for weeks was now inevitable. I had spent too many years silent, trying to keep the peace, trying to gain their approval. Today, I wasn't asking for anything. I wasn't pleading for a change. This was no longer about seeking validation. It was about standing up for myself. It was about asserting my worth, not just to them, but to myself. But there was still a part of me, deep inside, that feared the rejection, feared the scorn that might come next. Would they mock me? Would they twist my words, tell me I was wrong, that I was overreacting? I had no way of knowing, but I was tired of letting fear dictate my decisions. I had nothing left to lose. My family had already rejected me, ignored me, and manipulated me for far too long. It was time to stop being the person they expected and become the person I had always been capable of being. When I walked into the room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Rosalind sat at the kitchen table, her face a mask of indifference. Nate stood by the window, his arms crossed, as if expecting a confrontation, but still unwilling to face me fully. It was as if they both thought this was just another one of my emotional outbursts that could be shrugged off. But today was different. Today, I wasn't here to beg for their understanding. Today, I was here to make them listen. I put the documents down on the table in front of them. The will, the proof, the truth. The silence that followed was deafening. Rosalind looked down at the papers, her brow furrowed, but she didn't say a word. Nate shifted his weight uncomfortably, clearly not expecting me to come prepared like this. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling only slightly but with force. "Why did you keep this from me? For how long did you think I wouldn't notice? How long did you think I would let you keep taking from me?" Rosalind's reaction was immediate. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, the dismissiveness in her tone sending a surge of anger through me. "Megan, you're overreacting. This is just paperwork. This is about what's best for the family. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. You've always been dramatic about these things." Dramatic? Dramatic? My pulse quickened, and I felt my chest tighten. Dramatic? You took everything from me, everything I worked for, and you call it dramatic? The words flew out of my mouth before I could stop them. "You gaslighted me for years, and now you're going to sit here and pretend like I don't have a right to be angry?" Nate finally spoke up, his voice low and defensive. "You don't get it, Megan. You never have. This was about fairness. You're just mad because things didn't go your way. You need to let it go." Fairness. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was the same old narrative they always spun, one where they were the victims, and I was the one who didn't understand. "Fairness? You think this is about fairness?" I snapped. "This is about manipulation, about years of me giving and you taking. This is about me being invisible to you until you needed something from me." The anger that had been simmering for so long boiled over. It wasn't just about the will anymore. It wasn't just about the money. It was about my dignity, my self-respect, my need to be seen. And in that moment, I realized something vital. They weren't going to understand. They never would. And I didn't need them to. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions that threatened to drown me. There was a moment of clarity, a shift in my mind. I didn't need their approval. I never had. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. "You don't get to decide my worth anymore," I said, my voice steady now, despite the turmoil still churning inside me. "I'm done with trying to earn your love, done with being the one who always sacrifices. I'm done with all of it." Rosalind sat there, her face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Nate looked more confused than anything else. But they couldn't understand. They weren't capable of it. This was my final stand. I wasn't asking for their permission. I wasn't begging for their acceptance. I was taking my power back. I turned and started walking toward the door, my feet heavy but my resolve unwavering. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking away from the past, from everything that had kept me tethered to a life that wasn't mine. As I stepped out of that house, I knew one thing for sure. I had done the right thing. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free. I sat on the couch, the silence around me feeling heavier than usual. The confrontation with my family still echoed in my mind, but now that the dust had settled, I was left with the aftermath. My emotions were raw, but I couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of freedom that had followed. I had stood up for myself finally, but at what cost? There was a weight to the choice I had made. I had cut ties with my family, the people who were supposed to be my support system, my anchors. Part of me felt relief, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. But there was another part of me, buried deep inside, that couldn't shake the guilt. Had I done the right thing? Was this really the path to my happiness? I thought back to the years I had spent pleasing them, always putting their needs above my own. I had allowed myself to be gaslit, manipulated, treated as if my feelings didn't matter. Now that I was free, I couldn't help but wonder if there had been another way. Could I have salvaged something? Was it worth throwing it all away? But then the realization hit me, like a wave crashing over me. I had to let go. I had to let go of the illusion of family that I had been holding on to. They were never going to change. I had given enough chances, spent enough time trying to make things right, but nothing ever shifted. Nothing ever changed. So, I was left with the truth. The truth that standing up for myself wasn't just about defending my right to inherit or asking for respect, it was about reclaiming my life. It was about honoring my own worth, not waiting for someone else to see it. And in that moment, I felt a sense of relief. The weight of their indifference, their neglect, no longer had the power to hold me down. I had freed myself, and while the path ahead was uncertain, it was mine to walk. I looked out the window, the light from the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. It felt symbolic somehow, like I was in the middle of something, no longer the person I was, but not yet the person I was becoming. The silence was still there, but it wasn't suffocating. It was a kind of peace, a kind of openness. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to hide my emotions or silence my needs for the comfort of others. I could finally breathe. There was so much uncertainty ahead of me. The road to recovery, to rebuilding my life, would be long. But I had a new sense of hope, a new sense of purpose. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. The decision to rebuild didn't come easily. There were moments of doubt, moments when the fear of the unknown crept in. What would I do? Where would I go? But then I reminded myself of everything I had already survived. I had already broken free from the chains that had held me back for so long. Now, I was the one in control. I began to take small steps. I updated my resume, started looking into career opportunities I'd once dreamed of but never pursued. I spent time reconnecting with old friends, people who had always been there but whom I had pushed away in my years of family chaos. Slowly, things started falling into place. I wasn't just moving forward, I was embracing change. It was uncomfortable, yes, but it was also exhilarating. I wasn't trapped by the expectations of others anymore. I was free to choose my own path, free to be myself without guilt, without shame. I needed to confront the past head on, not just the family drama, but the memories of the places I once visited with them, the parks, the restaurants, the vacation spots that held so much weight. I needed to visit them, to confront them, and to finally let go. I started with the old family cabin, the one I'd spent every summer at. As I pulled up to the place, a lump formed in my throat. It was the place where everything had fallen apart, where the cracks in my family had first started to show. I walked through the door, the air thick with memories. But this time, it didn't hurt as much. It didn't have the power it once did. I was stronger now. I could stand in these memories and not let them define me anymore. I made my way upstairs to the bedroom that used to be mine. The walls were covered with photos, with trinkets from trips long past. I picked up a few of the objects, each one tied to a memory, but this time I didn't feel the need to hold on. I put them all in a box and placed it by the door. I didn't need those things anymore. They didn't define me. I was no longer the person they had tried to make me be. I was someone new, someone who could stand on her own and build the life she wanted. And with that realization came a sense of liberation. I looked at the box of memories one last time, and as I closed the door behind me, I knew I was done. Done with the past, done with the guilt, done with living for someone else's approval. I was finally free. The moment I had been dreading and anticipating was finally here. Standing in front of the door, I could feel my heart racing. I had decided to confront my family one last time, not for closure, not to get their approval, but to let them know my truth, to stand firm in my decision to move on. I had spent years in their shadow, always fighting for a place, a voice, a semblance of respect. But no more. I knew that walking through that door was the final step, the last act of defiance I would ever have against the expectations and manipulation they had thrust upon me. I was no longer scared, no longer looking for validation from anyone, especially not them. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My mother and brother were sitting in the living room, their eyes immediately locking onto mine. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating, but this time it didn't have the same power over me. I was in control now. "I'm done," I began, my voice steady but firm. This isn't about the money or the past, it's about me. I've spent my whole life trying to please you, trying to be who you wanted me to be, but I can't do it anymore. I've been gaslit and manipulated for too long, and I'm done fighting for a place that doesn't exist. The words came out in a rush, but I didn't feel any regret. This was my truth. It was the only thing that mattered now. My mother's reaction was just as I expected, defensive, dismissive. "You're overreacting," she said, waving me off with a flick of her hand. "This is all just drama. You need to calm down and stop being so sensitive." My brother, as always, looked at me with confusion and frustration. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, Meg," he said, his voice laced with irritation. "We did what we had to do. You're being unfair." I could feel my anger rising, but I didn't let it control me. I had already reached the point where their words no longer had power over me. "No," I said, meeting both of their gazes without flinching. "I'm not being unfair. I'm just standing up for myself. I've let you both walk all over me for too long, and I can't do that anymore. I'm not asking for an apology, and I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you that I'm done. I'm walking away from all of this." I watched their faces, noting the shock and disbelief on my mother's face and the frustration in Nate's eyes. But none of it mattered. Their reactions, their attempts to argue and justify their actions, were nothing more than empty words now. I had already made my decision. As I stood there, I felt a strange sense of calm. The emotional release I had been yearning for was finally here. There was no more waiting for them to acknowledge my worth. No more hoping for a change that would never come. And as I turned to leave, I felt lighter. Not because I had won, but because I had finally let go. The weight of trying to please them, to fit into a family that never understood me, was gone. I walked away, my steps slow but steady. The weight of my decision hung in the air, but there was no turning back now. I felt a sense of finality, but also a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced before. I was no longer bound by their expectations, their neglect, their manipulation. I was free, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The process of letting go wasn't easy. There were moments when the guilt crept in, when the weight of everything I had severed started to feel like too much. But with each passing day, the feeling of relief grew stronger. I had been carrying the burden of their disapproval, their indifference, for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. It wasn't just about them. It was about me. About finally understanding that I didn't need their permission to live my life. I didn't need their approval to be happy. I didn't need to keep explaining myself, defending my choices, or justifying my existence. As I processed everything, I realized the power in that. True freedom wasn't about escaping from them. It was about releasing the hold they had on my mind, my emotions, my very sense of self. And once I let go, I felt the chains fall away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had forgiven them. But more importantly, I had forgiven myself. I wasn't responsible for their behavior. I was only responsible for mine, and I had chosen to move on. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the weight of everything I had left behind. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, but I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I had faced my family, faced my past, and I had survived. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my life for me, and nobody else. As I set out on this new path, I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer afraid. I was ready for whatever came next, even if it was uncertain, even if it was difficult. The journey had just begun.